Things are heating up in the Minnesota Vikings free agent market as Trey Smith, guard of the Kansas City Chiefs, has once again been linked to the Vikings as their top target of any free agent in the NFL. We're going to be talking about what he brings to the table for Minnesota and why things have been heating up between him and the Minnesota Vikings here in this video. Before we get into it, though, we know that 91% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot for all of your Minnesota Vikings news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button. Join us here on the channel. We're covering everything Minnesota Vikings. I'm waiting ultimately for what is hopefully to be this Trey Smith contract for the Minnesota Vikings. And Griffen, this is a big one for the Vikings. Obviously, we've been talking about offensive line here for a couple weeks at this point, since the Vikings really got eliminated from the playoffs, and a lot due to the offensive line, and really having no help for Sam Darnold back there and whatnot. But the offensive line is the biggest need for the Minnesota Vikings. That is something that I think every Vikings fan has kind of accepted at this point. And Trey Smith, being a free agent, being the youngest free agent guard available, certainly has some great ties to the Minnesota Vikings here at this point. And we're going to start this one off here. What Minnesota needs upgrades in their interior offensive line. There's no doubt about that. Neither Ed Ingram nor Dalton Risner are the answer to right guard. The other two starters, Blake Brandel and Garrett Bradbury, should be on shaky ground as well. The crown jewel of this year's free agent guard class is Trey Smith, the former 6th-round pick who has been consistently excellent for the Chiefs over the course of his rookie contract. Now, a little background, I guess we could say here on Trey Smith. If not the playoffs, have his playoff success with the Chiefs, their Super Bowls, have anything to say about it. Between the regular season and playoffs, he started 79 of 80 games at right guard for the Kansas City Chiefs. Since he was drafted, playing over 5,200 snaps, he and his teammates are going to be third consecutive Super Bowl, going for a Super Bowl win on Sunday. Smith has earned a PFF grade between 72 and 76 every season, including strong marks both at a run block and pass protector. He's about as consistent as they come. As Star Tribune's Ben Gosling thinks, the Vikings will have plenty of interest in getting him to Minnesota. I will get into a quote that he has in a minute. But Griffen, the big part here about him is the run and pass protection. We know the Vikings, especially now with the plan of putting J.J. McCarthy into this lineup as the starting QB, they're looking for protection in every single asset of this game. We know that J.J. McCarthy is a great running quarterback. He's good with the feet. He's good with his running backs. He can sling the ball, and every bit of that is going to matter for this offensive line. So having a guy, the best in free agency, will be one of the best guards of probably, I don't want to say all time, but up in the coming seasons. This is what the Vikings need. The Vikings have to be in on him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the number one priority that you have to go into the offseason. We knew the offensive line alone as a whole was the biggest priority of this offseason because for the past few years, the Vikings as an organization have been in denial about this offensive line. It's been Swiss cheese for the past almost decade, maybe even longer, because it didn't matter who was quarterback behind there, how great they were, how solid they played. They were getting exposed and getting sacked so many times, and we saw that, especially in the last 2 weeks of the season with this Vikings team, especially in that playoff game. I know Brian O'Neill went down with an injury, which was very unfortunate, but even before that happened, this offensive line was not holding up against that Rams pass rush, and that Rams pass rush, as young and as good as they are, they still aren't the best pass rush in the NFL. So if you can't stop that pass rush, how are you going to stop all these top pass rushes, especially when you have Super Bowl ambitions? You want to go on a deep playoff run. You're only going to be playing against better teams each and every week until you get to that final game. So by the time you get to that game, you're going up against probably one of, if not the best pass rush in the NFL at that time when you make it to that game, or if you make it to that game. So you want to make sure that you have the best offensive line possible. You want to make sure you have the best team possible in every position. But especially with protecting your quarterback, especially J.J. McCarthy, who is going to need a bit more time. He's not going to be able to get the ball out as fast as someone like Sam Darnold or some of these other guys. I know Sam Darnold, he didn't even get the ball out very fast, and look where that got us. So if you have McCarthy, who's going to need a bit more time even after that, especially when you need that run game to go in tandem with him because he relies on running back so much, and with Trey Smith being a very experienced pass blocker and run blocker, it's a no-brainer as far as who you got to go out and get in this situation, especially when he already has 2 Super Bowls and he's going for a third one and he's still in his rookie contract. So you can bring a guy over here who's already got 3 Super Bowls just at the end of his rookie deal and really getting into the prime of his career after winning so many Super Bowls, getting all that playoff experience as well. It's not just the trophies that come with it. It's the experience. It's the lessons that he had. He's been with Andy Reid for his whole entire career, so he brings that mentality to Minnesota. It's going to bode well for this team, especially on an offensive line where we need more protection and we need more weapons, especially when these pass rushes are getting better and when our offensive line gets a lot of injuries like they do. Offensive line injuries, they're very, very common in the NFL. It happens almost every single week where we see an offensive lineman go down for at least a few weeks, if not on IR or a season ender. So you want to make sure that that is insured as well. I know it's going to cost a lot to get him, but you go get him at any price possible.
Yeah, the Vikings obviously had a big issue with their injuries on the offensive line this season, but that's no excuse. Healthy or not, this offensive line still had struggles, and getting Trey Smith to start off would be, the best start possible to make this offensive line the best that it could possibly be. And being the youngest, being 25 years old, having 3 Super Bowls, standing in front of Patrick Mahomes, having Andy Reid, there's no more that this kid could have heading into his contract year. And many teams are going to be looking for his assets, but the Vikings should be number one on this list, no doubt. And this is what Ben Gosling had to say on this topic. He said, I think that they'll be pretty aggressive for players like that. I think they're going to be aggressive at guard. He's probably at the top of the guard market, which will be expensive, but I think they're going to make a big priority of going after a guard. I think they would have a lot of interest in getting a guy like him in here, so I would expect that they'd be involved if he makes it to the market, which he might. Because the Chiefs have other guys to sign, I think it's very possible that they get him in the mix for him. So obviously we do know the Chiefs are probably going to try and get him back, but will they have enough money is the big thing. The Vikings currently have $61 million in cap space, 7th in the NFL in that total. But when we're looking at a guy like Trey Smith, who's going to be commanding upwards of $20 million, and putting him in an offense line that looks like this right now is certainly a must. Obviously the tackles are great, and we do not see Christian Darrisaw here, who went down with a torn ACL. Cam Robinson, a free agent, that clears up more cap space as well. Having these guards right now, and Sandra and Garrett Bradbury, are not ideal. So when you're adding Trey Smith, whether it be 20 million, whether it be 25 even, there are things you're going to have to focus on spending, and this is most certainly one. And here's what this article continues on to say. It won't be cheap. Spotrick estimates that Smith will get a 4-year deal worth just shy of $20 million per year, which would make him one of the 5 highest paid guards in the NFL. But that's the exact kind of move the Vikings can make if they let Sam Darnold walk in free agency and lean into J.J. McCarthy and the roster building advantage of having a quarterback on a rookie contract. And this, once again, ladies and gentlemen, is where this comes into play of letting Sam Darnold walk. Yes, he was good this regular season. Not great at the end, but certainly got us to the point where we were this season. But you really cannot afford to let him go back on this team. We had him at a cheap deal. We had him on a great deal. Even though it was 1 year, you bring him back now for what he's going to be worth. This team is going to be worse than what it was last season, and there is no doubt about that, because you will not be able to build around this team and get the assets to help Sam Darnold even more. But as I mentioned, when you put him into a lineup like this, into an offensive line like this, you need to get some more guards. You need to get extra assets in here, because this is not a playoff offensive line. I'm sorry, but it really is not at this very moment. But Trey Smith, Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill certainly make that stride to get to that point. So, Griffen, ultimately, when we're looking at the contract, we know that there are multiple moves the Vikings are going to make. We have to get Byron Murphy back into this lineup at some manner. We have a few other things we got to work on. Of course, the offensive line is a big one. We'd like another pass rusher. What do you think about the $20 million? Because obviously that's a lot of money, but when you get a guy like Trey Smith, who ultimately, when putting him into a list like this, the youngest available guard right now, going to be making top 5 guard in the NFL money, it certainly comes to a point where the Vikings have to think about the money, but they can do it.
Yeah, that 20 million is going to be pretty steep, but like you said, it's worth every penny because of what we saw this year. We really saw how bad this offensive line is in crunch time, and when the chips are down, they're going to fold under pressure and just allow them to get to the quarterback and not give him time to throw. Part of it is on bad reads as well on Sam's part. That was something that he struggled with in the last 2 weeks, and that's ultimately why you cannot bring Sam Darnold back. Like we covered in our video about Sam Darnold's extension, or what that number could be, the Minnesota Vikings signed Justin Jefferson to an extension knowing they were going to go get J.J. McCarthy and build around those two as the future of this team. And then Sam Darnold came along and was great for that season, but he was on a cheap deal, like you said. And like we've mentioned many times before, if they get enamored by that and they sign him based on that, you're stuck in Kirk Cousins 2.0, possibly even worse, because you can't go get the weapons around him. You lose so much cap space. Yeah, we go out and get Trey Smith at 20 million. We only have 40 or so million left to get Byron Murphy and some other guys. You get Byron Murphy, it drops down to about 20. So that makes things really hard as is. So if you sign Sam Darnold, you're probably not getting either of those guys, and you're having to go get guys on cap-friendly deals that are going to be solid, but they're not going to put you over the top and get you there. Minnesota, compared to other playoff teams, especially this season or even in the past, everyone's counted out Minnesota as frauds because no matter what the wins that they get, they're usually against teams that aren't the strongest in the league. We had some strong wins this year, but not many against great teams. So everyone's kind of always counted out the Minnesota Vikings because despite the star power they have at the skill positions, they don't have star power in the depth positions or where it matters most. You look at KC, they're always talking about Chris Jones. They're always talking about their offensive line that they have. San Francisco, they get props on their offensive line. Philly, massive props on their offensive line. Dallas, every year, they're talked about it. And Philly, they're contenders every year, and they're a scary contender every year, as much as I hate to say it, because I hate the Eagles so damn much. But because they have that offensive line, they are very scary against defenses. So you want to have that offensive line that teams are scared of. That's the thing, is Minnesota, as solid as we are, as star-studded as we are not a scary team. Teams do not fear us. We don't have a quarterback that teams fear us with, because we always have this quarterback that seems like they have to kind of prove their worth in a sense. Aside from Brett Favre, we've never had a quarterback like that in recent memory, where it was an established guy who was solid, reliable, and you can count on wins. Kirk Cousins was not that guy. Teddy Bridgewater, he was solid. He was not that guy. Christian Ponder absolutely wasn't that guy. And then you have Kirk Cousins. He wasn't that guy. Sam Darnold, he could have been that guy. He was showing that he might be that guy, but when the chips were all down, he folded under pressure, and a part of that was because of his quarterback play and also because of the offensive line. So no matter who you sign at quarterback or whoever you pay at quarterback, if you don't have the pieces to protect him and give him time to throw or give the run game time to develop, you're not going to have a good offense. And this is an offensive line where we haven't had any superstars on it before. We got one now, Christian Darrisaw. Brian O'Neill is really solid. You bring in Trey Smith, you have a very good third piece, an elite third piece of that offensive line that can finally be a little bit more intimidating.
That is a very, very good point as well on the star power. Teams don't fear us. We don't have those extra assets that teams need to be successful. And, like you said, having the Chiefs, having the Eagles, the Cowboys, these teams are known for how good their every asset on their teams are. And the Vikings just don't have that yet. But Trey Smith would be a great start. And, as one thing as well that we should mention, Trey Smith, a 6th-round pick, it just goes to show how good of guards you can get in these later rounds, which is a big thing with the Vikings, with not having too many picks. So there's a lot of moves the Vikings are going to make here in the draft, but Trey Smith needs to be number one, zero doubt in my mind. Let us know what you think in the comments below. But Griffen, you got anything else before we finish this one off?
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see what Minnesota does, and I think it also would go to show what their draft position is going to be. We know that we covered Savai from Arizona as an offensive line position that we could be going out and drafting. But again, with the age, I don't like the idea of necessarily taking a big chance on a young guy. Where, yeah, Trey Smith is young, but he's young and already established at this point because he could potentially have 3 Super Bowls by the end of his rookie deal. I can't think of another guard or another player, even for that matter, that was able to do that in their career. So for him to be able to do that, that's already incentive enough to bring him in instead of trusting a rookie as well. However, I still like the idea of them drafting Savai Nye, even if they go get Trey Smith.
Yeah, so we got to keep a close eye on Trey Smith here this weekend. Everybody, make sure if you're watching this game wearing purple and yellow, you're sitting down watching the right guard for the Chiefs, because he could certainly be in a Vikings jersey next season. But that's all we got in this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. And remember, let us know what you think about Trey Smith in the comments below. Certainly a great addition on paper, and what do you think it's going to translate onto the field like. But as I mentioned, that's all we got. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.